American media tell it. To hear the American media tell it, to hear Democrats tell it, the only place on earth where mass shootings occurs is the United States. Of course, you know that's not true. But if you were to believe those on the left, both the politicians and their handmaidens in places like CNN and MSNBC, America's the only place that ever experiences a mass public shooting, which of course isn't true. And in fact, my next guest has spent decades studying gun crimes and gun events and sometimes mass shootings. Dr. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can find out more at crimeresearch.org. Doctor, welcome back to the program.
Morning, Steve.
Good to have you here. You know, I saw you recently on the Sinclair Broadcast Group, and you talked about this again because you tell people this in your ongoing effort to set the record straight. And I give you great praise because you do so day after day. You say, now, wait a second. You're saying this and this and this. And for Democrat politicians and for those in the media that are all openly hostile to the Second Amendment, hostile to the private ownership of guns, you try to tell them the truth, but they are awfully resistant to it, aren't they?
Oh, they're incredibly resistant. And one of the more pernicious talking points, as you say, is that somehow the United States is unique in terms of mass public shootings. If you look at the data that we put together from 1998 through 2017, the United States makes up about 1% of the mass public shooters around the world. And, we make up about 4.6% of the world population. So we're well below the world average. There are many countries in Europe, Russia, France, Finland, Norway, that have much higher murder rates from mass public shootings than we have here in the United States. It's really a dramatic difference that you see there.
And so why is it when in this day and age when we have so much information available at our fingertips on laptop computers or smartphones, we have a plethora of information. You can go run down the information on mass shootings around the world. And yet it seems to me that these journalists, and I use the term very loosely at this point, these journalists from some of these networks, they have no intellectual curiosity. They have no interest in finding out what the actual numbers are, what they indicate, why what they're telling and regurgitating on a regular basis just isn't true. They don't seem to care about what the truth is. Now, when I grew up, I asked questions all the time. I never believed anything anybody told me. That was a bit annoying to my mother, by the way. But I would challenge things and ask things and double check and cross-reference. Well, what happened to that mindset?
Look, the general public, I guess I don't blame too much because they just don't hear about these mass public shootings in the rest of the world very much. To the extent that they do get coverage, it's usually fairly brief. Things like the New Zealand attack are rarely covered. That's within a day of the New Zealand attack, you had a big mass public shooting in Brazil. You had another mass public shooting in the Netherlands. All within like 24 hours or so of the attack in New Zealand. But, people at least heard about the New Zealand attack. Maybe there was tiny coverage about the Brazil school shooting. But, it's just, so to the extent that these things are covered, it's usually just, a tiny story buried someplace in the newspaper. And Americans are much more interested about what happens in the United States than they are about what happens in, some foreign country. But you have big school shootings.
It's worse than that. Yeah, it's worse than that. People who live in New York City believe that there is nothing beyond New York City. That is the entire universe. Just ask them. They'll tell you.
Right.
But you look at what happened in Virginia Beach, it gets an inordinate amount of coverage, tremendous amounts of coverage. And then those on the left and in the media start talking about military-style assault rifles, as the governor of Virginia did, Governor Blackface, as I call him, north from there, even though I believe it was handguns used there. But he still takes the opportunity to target the private ownership of rifles. That doesn't make any sense either.
Look, within 2 or 3 hours, you had all the Democratic presidential candidates coming out, it seemed, for more gun control laws. As you say, before we knew the facts, they were coming out in favor of assault weapons bans, background checks on private transfers. None of those laws would have made any difference in this attack. And something like the favorite one that they have, these background checks on private transfers, wouldn't have stopped, not only that, but wouldn't have stopped any of the mass public shootings this century. Most of the mass public shootings don't involve rifles of any type, let alone so-called assault rifles. And so, they use these tragedies to try to push gun control. I want to do something. I want to try to stop these attacks from occurring.
Right.
But I want to try desperately. For years, I've wanted to try to do something that would stop. But I want to do stop it that's actually related to the attacks. And this attack that we just had in Virginia Beach occurred yet again in a place where general citizens were banned from having guns. You had a place where
nobody could defend themselves.
Right, exactly. You had a place where only municipal employees were stationed. This particular building, Operations Building 2, had things like the mail room or the tech center, the IT center, other things that were there that only public employees would go into. And beyond that, the killer used a key card to go within an area where only employees would possibly be able to go in. And that's where he did his attack. And public employees in that municipality were banned from having their concealed handguns with them. This guy had worked there for 10 years. He knew the rules. The one non-employee that was killed was alone by himself in the parking lot when the killer was on his way into the building that was there. So, but everybody that was in the building that was killed was a municipal employee and they all obeyed the rules. The killer didn't obey the rules that were there. The silencers are banned in Virginia Beach. This killer was using a silencer, but the thing.
But once again, what you're showing me here, Doctor, is this. Dr. John Lott with us is that those that follow the rules, those that are law-abiding citizens, pay the price for those that are not.
Well, it makes it easier for the killers to go and commit the crime. In fact, creates an attractive target because these people want to kill as many people as possible. And they know the longer it takes for somebody to arrive on the scene with a gun, the more people they're going to be able to kill.
Well, there you have it. Dr. John Lott is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can find out more at crimeresearch.org. I know you've written a number of books on these topics, Doctor, over the years. How many books have you written, and what is available to people today that you think they should read?
Well, I've written 9 books. I suppose the most relevant right now are The War on Guns, as well as More Guns, Less Crime. More Guns, Less Crime's in its 3rd edition from the University of Chicago Press. But, I think The War on Guns is probably the most relevant for most people. But
people need to educate themselves. I mean, that's right. It. They got to educate themselves. Doctor, I've got about 15 seconds. I'll give you the last word.
I mean, we have a wealth of information on our website at crimeresearch.org. If you want to go and see the rate that mass public shootings occur in gun-free zones, you can go to our website. If you want to go and see the research that we've just done on school shootings over the last 19 years, we have detailed information. It's all
there. And we got to leave it right there. Dr. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, the books, the research, the information, crimeresearch.org, the place to go. It's the Steve Gerber Show.